So you've probably heard that stress is bad for you, and there's a lot of negative connotations when it comes to stress because, it is bad for your immune system. It causes you to be anxious and have burnout and drains your energy. But I want to kind of clear up some of the misconceptions when it comes to stress and specifically cortisol, because when we think about the word stress, we think of it as a negative, but it's actually neutral. And that is because the definition of stress is just your body mobilizing energy to meet a challenge or demand. And this is not good or bad. It's basically how you perceive or believe that demand to be. And that's where the mindset part of it comes in when it comes to your stress. Because let's take, for example, two people at work that need to meet a deadline. One person can view this deadline as something that's highly stressful in a negative sense, and they're unprepared, it's overwhelming, and that causes them to view this stress as a threat. Now, on the flip side, the other person could view this deadline as excitement, something that gives them energy and gives them meaning. And because of that, their physiology will be different because they're rising up to the challenge, but they're still under stress. So, what ends up happening is two different people and they have two different responses to the stress itself. Now, your body releases three primary chemicals when it comes to stress by your adrenal gland, which is cortisol, adrenaline, and also something called DHEA. Now, for cortisol, cortisol really gets a bad rep because it's associated as the stress hormone, but cortisol is actually what helps you to wake up in the morning. So usually 30 to 45 minutes before you wake up, that's where cortisol spikes from when you're sleeping. And that's what helps you to mobilize energy so that you can be alert and ready for the day. And then that's why if you've ever taken melatonin to go to sleep, melatonin is what's released in the body to help you to go to sleep. So there's kind of that balance between your cortisol and your melatonin. Now, the thing is, when it comes to cortisol, when cortisol increases, this is what helps to kind of suppress some unnecessary immune functions at that point in time, because when your cortisol levels raise, your heart races, blood pressure rises, and glucose gets flooded into your system, basically to help you to raise up to the challenge. And that's where that idea for cortisol and stress is that the stress response is either fight, flight, or freeze, or in another sense, for focus. So when you think about cortisol, cortisol isn't bad. It's only bad when it's prolonged. Just like stress isn't bad, it's only bad when it's chronic stress, which is prolonged durations of elevated cortisol levels, which can equate to what we call burnout. So that's when it starts to become bad, because you're wired but tired, and your immune system starts to break down because you are in this heightened state for an extended period of time and you're not releasing that cortisol. And that is what becomes a negative impact on your body. Now, when I mentioned earlier about one of the other three stress hormones, which is DHEA, this one goes in conjunction with your cortisol. So it's usually more of a ratio issue than whether you just have cortisol in your body, because cortisol is what shuts down your immune function and mobilizes energy, while DHEA, on the other hand, this is what helps with brain repair and immune function. So it's more of a balance between the ratios. So going back to an example of if someone is stressed but they're viewing the stress as bad, then usually their cortisol ratio will be higher cortisol and less DHEA, versus someone who is viewing the stress as a challenge, then they're actually viewing it from a different lens. And because of that, you can have more DHEA in that ratio. And that's where you can actually have recovery and build resilience through that stress. So it's really about how you frame the stress in your mind that changes the overall outcome of whether that breaks down your body or helps you to grow and also learn from the stress or challenge that you've been given. And that's kind of what I want to talk about today, because I think cortisol and stress get a bad rep, and that's not always the case. And the thing is, having a healthy amount of stress is actually good, because if you really think about it, in the scenario of two people working and one is stressed out of it feeling bad and one stressed because it's exciting, the thing is, in both those cases, the reason why they're feeling stressed is because they care. That means there's meaning assigned behind what they're doing, which is creating the stress because they care about their job. And that is what's creating the stress. But the physiological response to that stress is the difference that I want to point out, which is in relation to your mindset around it. Another example is if you think about working out. Like, someone could be sedentary, sitting at a desk working, and they're stressed and feeling burnt out. So their cortisol levels are rising and they stay elevated. And that's more bad for you than someone who's exercising, but they're still feeling that same stress, because the way that they're perceiving the stress is ultimately different. And that is what changes it. But in terms of the physical response, it could be the same. They could be like, two people could be exercising and one person seeing it as dreadful and the other person seeing it as exciting. And they're both under stress, and under physical stress and mental stress, but they're viewing it differently. And because of that, the way that their body responds over time is drastically different. And there's a Stanford research study that showed this, where people who viewed stress as a threat tend to die faster than people who viewed stress as a challenge. And just that mental reframe alone is what kind of increased the mortality rate of the people who viewed stress as a threat. So this is really the power of your mind when it comes to the stress. And that's why certain people handle stress a lot better than others. And it all comes from their viewpoint of the stress. And this is not to kind of put down or make it sound like stress is easy. It's definitely not. And stress can be bad for sure. And in many cases, we do experience negative stress. So stress is a bad thing in many ways. But changing our relationship to the stress and having that reframe to view it from a threat to being something that's exciting can help to kind of increase that DHEA levels in your body to kind of balance out the cortisol. And that is just something that you can do within your head, which will change your whole biological response. So that's all I want to kind of say about stress and why it is neutral. It's not something that's bad or good. It's just your body's response to gear up for rising up to the occasion for a challenge or demand. But how you perceive it is the greater impact on your overall health. So I hope this helps you. My name is Dexter, and have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.